For the ones who don't know what an isekai is, it's a genre in which the protagonist gets transported to a new world that they aren't familiar with. That's the very basics of it, and it's a huge genre when it comes to anime. You may have heard some titles such as ReZero, Konosuba, Mushoku Tensei, or your boy Kongming. The point is, all of these are what you call an isekai, and they have been bigger than ever in the recent years. Now I may not be an expert of this kind of genre, but the ones I've seen sure have been questionable. So I'm going to run through the isekais I've watched recently, and give my thoughts on each one, explaining why they are kinda dumb. Spoilers for each one I'm going to mention. No Game No Life is about two siblings, Shiro and Sora, living their normal lives as gamers known as Blank, an elite gaming team that always surpasses everybody else, until they beat God at a game of chess and are then transported to a new world, where the rules consist of simple games. Whether it's government or politics, games decide everything, and their quest is to be at the top of the 16 sentient races of that world and beat God at another game. I'll say one thing that really stands out in this show, which is the style of animation used. It's extremely colourful and nice to look at, the colours are bright and vibrant, the backgrounds make the world feel livelier, but that's probably the only positive I have. This show is just bad. And the sad thing is that I saw potential, the world looked nice and the animation was like nothing I've seen before, but it does so much wrong. First off, the world looks so great, yet you don't get to see a whole lot of it. Most of the time they spend the show in this castle where it looks generic and uninteresting. Then the whole thing with deciding the rules with games could have been something new, but it fails at that with the games being basic or just completely dumb. Such as one of the last games, which is played in a city. You expect there may be something interesting, but it falls flat and it just being one of those games where you shoot girls with some kind of love gun to take their clothes off. Why? The only okay game there was the chess game, which is pretty much that one scene in Harry Potter but with its own twist. It felt creative enough. But there are no stakes to the games they play, with Shiro and Sora being an elite gaming team. They are good at everything they do, so there's nothing on the line and it always works out in their favour. And the whole thing with humanity trying to be on top of all other races didn't engage me at all, because I didn't care about any of the characters, so why should I care if they are the weakest race in that world? The characters are so tedious as well, with having barely any development. Even if the series tries to make you feel any connection to them, it doesn't work because they're all so tiresome. Like Sora being so great at everything by achieving his goals like it was nothing. Then you get this annoying girl called Stephanie, who just complains all the time, making me despise every word that comes out of her mouth. Then this irritating cat thing, which has a real brain-numbing cutesy voice. Next is Jabril, who is an angel-type species called the Flugel, but she's just a dull character with nothing I found interesting about her. And lastly there's Shiro. She's a very quiet character and feels hopeless without Sora being by her side. And the series sure does a lot of weird stuff with her. The thing that bothered me about the series the most was the fan service. There are so many moments where the characters would have no clothes on or just other questionable stuff. It wouldn't bother me too much if this happened in other series, it's not really a big deal, but with No Game No Life, Shiro is only 11. It made me get really put off by the show. So I really can't say a lot that was good about this anime. It felt miserable to watch the farther I got into it. This just wasn't for me. The Devil is a Part-Timer is about Satan himself as he goes through a mysterious portal to retreat from a battle, then ends up in the modern day of Japan with his sidekick that followed. He soon realizes that his powers aren't as strong in this world, so he ends up following the rules of the world to somehow find a way to get his powers back to be stronger, so he can return to where he came from. With this, he ends up becoming a part-timer, getting a place of his own and changing his name to Mao Sadao, as he continues as a part-timer for a fast food chain, to try and rise to the top yet again. This concept was honestly really goofy that I found it entertaining to begin with. From him being Satan, ruling an entire army, conquering nations, to then change to a simple fast food employee, I enjoyed how Sadao took his job so seriously, where a slight mishap would happen and he would take it to the extreme. But then with each episode of the show, it got worse and worse each time, where the main concept of him being a part-timer started to drift away a bit, as it introduces situations that have absolutely nothing to do with the plot. I mean, the plot as episodes went on seemed that there wasn't really anything anymore. The whole thing with Sadao getting stronger powers so he can go back to his own world was completely pointless, because later on he decides that he doesn't want to do that anymore. So it felt like there was no point to anything that was happening. All the episodes were just filler, if you can even call it that. It has a whole swimsuit episode, and it was so pointless. Even if it did have a reason for progressing the plot, it didn't mean anything as it becomes irrelevant in the next episode. And don't get me started on these characters, I'll just name a few. First off, you have this extremely annoying big boobed girl, which has a crush on Sadao and won't shut up for a second, then keeps over exaggerating stupid scenarios. I hate her so much. And Mao Sadao, he's okay by being one of the more amusing ones, but his design is so questionable. When I imagine Satan, you know, the devil itself, I never imagine this. I know this is his human form, but they could have tried harder, rather than giving him the generic anime character look. Then you have this smart computer kid who likes to play video games as he hangs out at Sadao's home. And he doesn't make sense whatsoever, because this guy caused the entire tunnels to collapse and shot Sadao with some crazy laser thing, and somehow he's a good guy now? Okay. Then there's the hero Amelia, which also comes from the same world as Sadao. Her mission was to kill him, as he's Satan and she's the hero of their world, but then decides not to because he's a good guy now, and she starts becoming friends with him. Even though he killed her father and did other terrible things, I guess she just forgave him. There is so much I don't understand about this series. I know that you probably don't have to take everything so seriously in this show, but even so, it still doesn't make sense to me. I really did have hope at the beginning. All I wanted to see was Sadao doing more of his part-time job, as it is the title of the show, but even that got less apparent. So this show was promising at the start with its silliness, but then took a plummet few episodes later that made it such a bore to watch. This is an anime I could only watch one episode of. I thought it was terrible. You may argue that I didn't give the series a fair chance, but I couldn't sit through another episode. I really did dislike it that much. And the first episode is 47 minutes, so technically, that's like 2 episodes combined into one. But anyway, the Rising of the Shield Hero is about an ordinary dude called Naofumi, as he goes on with his day-to-day life reading novels in libraries. But one day he finds this book that suddenly transports him to another world, where he and 3 other people were summoned, where they are tasked to fight waves of enemies and save the kingdom, as they were now assigned as heroes. The Spear Hero, the Bow Hero, the Sword Hero, and Naofumi as the Shield Hero. The plot of this show is extremely rushed. You only get a brief 3 minutes of the main character explaining who he is and what he likes doing, then he is instantly summoned to the new world. To make it worse, he doesn't really care that he is somewhere else new, he just kind of accepts it, and so did the other 3. So I started to question, did this really have to be an isekai? You only get to see the real world for a short time. Then when Naofumi gets transported to the other world, he doesn't even care. So what was the point for it to be an isekai? Why couldn't it just be a simple quest about 4 heroes, without all this isekai nonsense?
Yes, I've not seen a whole series, so maybe it makes more sense later on, but I still think that this is a very lazy and basic plot, even compared to isekai standards, so it didn't entertain me to watch more. Even the world is bland, it's just another plain kingdom with nothing making it stand out. Then there's the concept of their weapons, they're all video game based, having levels and stats, and the heroes must kill countless enemies to level up their gear. I hate this idea. It's another concept I've seen in other animes, nothing feels refreshing. It feels like this show has no ideas of its own and does countless things that were already done before. The whole idea of video game mechanics is so damn brainless, like this guy entered the world through a book. What do video games have to do with this? The only excuse the show gives is because of status magic, which only the legendary heroes can see. Wow. What made me stop watching the show was honestly the concept itself. It was bland and boring. From the world, the characters' goals, and the power system, it was all so uninteresting. Even No Game No Life, sure I may have not liked it, but at least it had a different looking world and had better elements of game. It felt like something new, but was then executed poorly. The Shield Hero feels the most basic of basics. Watching this anime made me feel sad. It felt like the show wanted to keep in the trend of isekais instead of having an idea of their own. I refused to watch another episode. I thought it was abysmal. I may be complaining about each isekai I've talked about so far, but it was actually one that I liked, and that is That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. The title is too long, so from now on I'm just going to call it Slime. Slime starts off with a 37-year-old man named Satoru, an average guy with nothing special going on in their life. Until soon after knowing him, he dies by getting stabbed, then is suddenly reincarnated as a slime into another world. Shortly after his death, and now in their new slime form, they stumble into a dragon that gave them the name of Rimuru.
The special thing about Rimuru is their ability to gain powers by absorbing other life beings and being able to mimic their attributes. With these powers they gained, they then get approached by goblins who admire Rimuru's strength and ask the slime to help them with their village. And from there on, Rimuru helps the goblins form a civilization, requiring more members and recruiting other armies by expanding the little village to much greater lengths. There is a lot more to Slime than what I explained, but it would just drag on. So, what I like about Slime is how charming it feels. It's a show that I can relax to and switch my brain off for a bit. It has no groundbreaking story that keeps your eyes glued to the screen, but it's something that keeps me interested in its charm. By having fun, colourful characters differing in personalities and seeing how their civilization changes throughout the anime feels somewhat satisfying, by seeing it grow as more species are introduced into it. And then Rimuru makes the show more pleasant with their personality. Rimuru is very lovable and caring, with a witty feel to them, by making dumb puns now and again. But even though Rimuru is comical, it doesn't mean they're perfect. Since with that ability I explained before with the whole absorbing thing, he soon becomes overpowered and a lot of the fights end up feeling a little underwhelming. Where it can take me out of the show because there aren't many times where it had a lot of risk. Rimuru would just show up and get things taken care of without any problem at all. The show lacks a lot of suspense as the situations they end up in always works out for them. For example, later in the series, Rimuru encounters a small group of kids who get summoned into the world. But as children are weak, getting summoned was too much energy for them to handle, and in a span of 5 years they will die. To combat this, they need a superior spirit to be in control for the kids to be able to survive with all the energy they have. And it's up to Rimuru to get these spirits and save these kids. Now this sounds like a quest, where there are lives on the line and bad events may happen, but a few episodes later, they find a fairy person who just gives them the spirits. What was the point? There was nothing on the line, so it felt like a waste of time. And the show does stuff like this constantly. But even with this, Slime kept me entertained. It's not perfect, but it's a good enough series for me to waste time on and get enjoyment out of it. With that, I am done talking about isekais I've seen. The isekai genre I have extremely mixed feelings on, leaning more into disliking it. I find isekais to be very ununique, with the base of the story getting tiring each time. And seeing isekais getting more and more popular lately, it's something I roll my eyes to. Can you blame me with these titles? Reincarnated as a sword, so I'm a spider, so what? Do you love your mum and her 2-hit multi-target attacks? Time I got reincarnated as Yamcha? That one's quite good actually. But it's a genre I'm least interested in when it comes to anime. I can see the comedic value in them, but I don't expect them to be any good. Sure, I may have liked Slime, but I still find it mediocre compared to a lot of other animes. If there are any isekais which you enjoyed, I would honestly want to know about it, and see if there's another isekai out there I may like. Then maybe my opinion on isekais may change, but I doubt it.